Onika, welcome to Changing Shapes. It's so great to have you here.
Thank you.
You already know this. You are a huge inspiration to me in strategy, in business, and in the philosophy of life. So I'm truly hugely honored to have you on this episode. I think it's an interesting time for us to speak, considering our backgrounds and the rapid emergence of LLMs and the work that we do. So, yeah, if you don't mind, it'd be great to get a quick intro on who you are and where you're calling us from, and then we can dive right in.
Okay. My name is Onika Simon. I live in Berlin, but you can hear from my accent, I'm from Northwest London. I've been in Berlin for 11 years, and I have been a brand and business strategist for 24 years, almost 24 years. I'm 45 years old, so that means it's 24 years. And I currently run my own studio with my partner, my life partner, who's also my business partner. He's a graphic designer, and our design studio is called OK Sorted. And so together we develop communications with strategy and design. We like to work with people who are making a difference. We like to develop communications that are about moving all sorts of needles, whether it's commercial needles or cultural needles or literally just relationship needles within organizations. And we want to help everyone to collaborate better, because I'm sure we'll eventually get into it, but the future of the human race pretty much depends on our ability to collaborate. So we're starting small with that kind of greater goal in mind.
That's great. That's great. So, starting maybe from sort of touching on your beginnings, you started your career at a major ad agency in New York and you studied philosophy before that. How would you say did those early experiences shape the way you think about technology and creativity?
Big question. So I studied philosophy at the University of Manchester in the UK, but I could actually take a couple of steps back from that and talk about an experience I had before I arrived in Manchester. I was a very intense student, very good at getting A's, and it's a longer story. So through all sorts of things that happened, I ended up at Oxford University when I was 17. At Lincoln College and Oxford University. Needless to say, my family was over the moon. I had lots of previous teachers that were over the moon for me to be in Oxford, but I didn't stay there long. I stayed there for roughly 3 weeks before I decided I didn't want to be there anymore for all sorts of reasons, kind of personal, and also there was a lecturer that was making me deeply uncomfortable. And so I made an extremely controversial decision to leave what is considered the best university in the UK, if not the world, at the age of 17, because I did not feel like I was thriving there. If anything, I felt the opposite. I felt like the whole world was closing in on me. You know, the architecture was beautiful, the food was great, the people were friendly, other than this one guy, the lecturer. And I made the decision to go to my second choice, which was Manchester University. And I basically pulled the ripcord and was like, get me out of here, actually. I don't want to be here. And everyone's like, are you insane? What do you mean you don't want to be here? Here's where everyone wants to be. And so I arrived in Manchester a bit late. The reason why I ended up studying philosophy is because it was the only course that wasn't full. So it was by accident that I ended up studying philosophy. At Oxford, I was studying English and French simply because they were my passions. But I kind of got into philosophy and I didn't know much about it. I didn't know that there was an A-level philosophy because it hadn't been offered at the sixth form college where I went to. I didn't know what I was getting into, but it started with my very, very first course. Like the first unit was Introduction to Moral Philosophy. And as soon as my lecturer began to speak, I was like, oh, somehow I have ended up in exactly the right place. So I studied philosophy for 3 years, philosophy and English literature. Actually, it was a combined studies degree. And another very awesome piece of serendipity happened towards the end of my course. I was finishing my studies in late 2000. You know, obviously everybody was panicking about Y2K. And at the same time, there was a mandate order across the university that we weren't going to get our diplomas if we didn't register to get email addresses and begin using the internet. I had been writing my 30,000 word dissertation on the computer in the library and then saving it to floppy disk and getting out of there. And all of a sudden we had to get email, whatever that was. And I resisted it. I resisted it till the very, very last day. And the librarian who I'd gotten to know, she was actually one of my friends around campus, she said, "Hey, dude, you have to do this. Otherwise, you're not going to get your diploma." And I was like, "Okay, fine. What? What do I have to do?" And it's like 2 o'clock in the morning, on like a Friday morning. This is when I used to do I've always been a nighttime thinker. So it was like 2 o'clock in the morning. It's a 24-hour library. She wheeled out the computer and, opened MSN Explorer and like showed me how to make a Hotmail account, and then did the same thing for a university EDU account, and basically forced me to go online. And the MSN Explorer homepage was a mess. I was like, what is that? To me it looked like the back of a newspaper, where you have like all the ads for like all the random local businesses that nobody wants, right? It looked like that to me. And so I did what I had to do and then went to the bathroom. And then this is the serendipity moment. On the back of the bathroom door was a sticker saying, "Are you about to graduate and would you like to find a job?" And I was like, yes, and yes, actually. Because another piece of context is Tony Blair had removed free higher education. So I was part of the very, very first cohort of students in the UK that had to take out a grant. Yeah, because I started in 1998. And so I knew that I needed to get a job, but I'd just finished studying philosophy for 3 years, which is not vocational. So I was panicking. And I saw this sticker on the back of a bathroom door. And it said, www.thegraduateonline.co.uk, which is a lot to remember if you've never even seen a URL and you don't have a smartphone, because those don't exist yet. So I had to run to my desk, run back to the bathroom, write it down, go back to the computer, type it all in. And it was great. It was a series of multiple choice questions that led to job applications. And so this multiple choice thing led me to apply for 6 jobs in advertising, 2 of which were overseas. And my application was successful for the WPP Marketing Fellowship, and the rest is history. Like, I literally moved to New York a few months later and started my career.
So the serendipity of technology and creativity was coming together right from the beginning.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I could even go further, because there's another dramatic twist in this story, which I think you already know, which is the second day of my career was Tuesday, the 11th of September, 2001. So after I had basically landed the job, I had decided that I wanted to start in New York. I had lots and lots of helpers helping me get my visa. There was also a kind of foot and mouth pandemic or epidemic happening in the UK at the time. So hundreds of thousands of livestock were being slaughtered. And America was very leery of anybody from the UK setting foot on American soil. So I also had to go into quarantine and have everything that belonged to me that had touched the floor be sterilized by men in hazmat suits. Came to my apartment. And then all my stuff was shipped. And then I finally landed in New York. And then the rigmarole of getting a social security number, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I jumped through all those hoops. My first day went really well. I met everyone in the planning department. I was a junior planner. And then the second day, I literally arrived at the building, 2 people gawping at screens, wondering what on earth was going on. I think the culmination of the story that I've just told might set the tone for the rest of this conversation, actually. Like, basically watched the best and the worst of humanity, in that day, and then that week, and then that month. And then I ended up in New York for 10 years. So the fallout from 9/11 pretty much shaped my entire approach to my work. Like, we saw the real human devastation, and then the news was reporting about stocks crashing and the economy crashing and Wall Street panicking. And within 24 hours, we found out that 40% of our team had to be let go. And so around the firings happened. People left their desks into boxes weeping mere days after the event. Some of them had actually lost loved ones and then they lost their job in the same week. And so I sat there thinking, okay, there's something very off about this because things that seem ephemeral and not so important are being prioritized. Yeah. Like stocks, shares, the economy, whatever that is being prioritized over feelings, over humans, over death, and yeah, we all know what happened next then. The war on terror. It really shaped the first half of my career. The first 12 years of my career, my heart wasn't in it. Needless to say, my heart was not in the work. And I really wondered, like, what on earth the work is even for.
I mean, that's yeah, what a way to start your career. And but then afterwards you then, if I recall correctly, you moved back to London and now Berlin. So you've really had a really deep experience on the cultures between the US, the UK, and Germany, but also the different cultural attitudes, both personally and in work. Have you noticed any differences how these cultures are embracing or fearing the new technological developments that we're having today, either in art or in your industry?
Another big
Or is
question.
there like a local context that you think is important that we should consider when talking about the sort of impact of AI
Hmm.
on culture
I
globally?
think I think local context is very important. Naturally, I'm a cultural strategist, so I have to believe that. Um, I mean, also it's the personal lens too, right? Like I lived in New York in my 20s. I arrived when I was 21 and left when I was 30. 29, in fact. And then I spent a few more years in London, pretty much just trying to find my feet in the industry and find my position in the industry, because strategists are generalists. And so, you're given this lofty label. Nobody tells you what it means. And then it's your job to figure out what it means for you and what it means for your clients so that they'll trust you. So, yeah, I spent 21 to 29 in New York, and then 30 to 35 ish in London, and then the last 10 years here. And I will say, with regards to creativity and the industry, New York is really all about opportunity. I mean, New York is a microcosm. New York cannot represent America in the same sense that London cannot represent the UK, and Berlin certainly cannot represent Germany. They are exceptions, if anything. They're exceptional capitals of their respective nations. But in New York, it may have been my youthful exuberance, but it really feels like a place of opportunity. And it's the opportunity to become wealthy. Yeah, people don't talk about fulfilling their purpose in New York, at least not to me. People talk about their passion, but they talk about their grind more. They talk about what they can make happen. And so, opportunity seems to be the thing everyone is seeking. People aren't just material, but it's that opportunity to show who you are, to prove who you are, to do something different, to stand out. But it's really just give me a chance. Open that door a tiny bit. Let me speak to that person. And it's all about trying to chase that. So new tools come and go, new tech comes and goes, but the way it always tends to be applied is in search of new opportunities. In London, I would say I'm definitely biased because I'm from there. But in London, everything is about class and categorization. So what I mean by that is most topics, design or lifestyle or anything mundane, even where you're going on holiday, is discussed through the lens of, well, I do this job and I make this much and this is my family and this is where we're from. Therefore, we're going to go here. People are surprised if you do something unexpected. It's less about opportunity and it's more about either fulfilling or perpetuating class structures. This is all my personal opinion. And so when it comes to new tools and new creativity, there's always a question of who's going to use this? Who's going to use it? Who is it for? Yeah. And nobody would admit that we're thinking about class, right? But something like AI comes along and there's this immediate assumption among the working classes or the lower middle classes that the rich pricks are just going to take this and run with it. Like it's for them. It's not for us, you know? Well, I don't want to limit it to, again, my point of view, but I'm sure that there is amazing inventive things happening. among younger people, among poorer people, among non-white people. I'm sure they're taking AI and they're doing amazing things. But that is not what's going to be reported. That's not what's going to be spoken about. Yeah. So far, I think AI has been limited by who's talking about it. The people who are talking about it are money people and industry people. Industrial and economical conversations are happening around AI. Very, very few creative conversations. Everything creative is tainted by the economic lens that I've seen so far. So I'm waiting to see who will actually make a difference with it. Because the question in the UK is always who, us or them, like us or them. And so that's, that's to me, I'm just watching and waiting. And then in Berlin, we'll start with the personal. For me, Berlin is where like very, very hardworking, burned out people come to die. Berlin really, I said this in a previous interviews, Berlin feels like hospice care, right? It feels like hospice for people who got burned out in the creative industry because everybody here is chill. We're chilling. We're having fun, we're eating well, we're spending less money, we're riding our bikes.
That's great.
And this whole AI stuff's coming in and we're like, okay, I wonder what the capitalists are going to do with this, right? Like, that's not us. So that's the personal lens. If I zoom out and try to give a more objective opinion, in Berlin, the only thing I would say is true of Berlin that could represent all of Germany is the emphasis on craft. Yeah, Berlin is a place that cares about craft. And I'll kind of close the loop there because I said the UK, London and the UK is about class and New York and the US is about opportunity. And I would say in Berlin, there is a bias towards the analog, the tangible, the craftedness of things. Obviously, was up until now a thriving art community that was subsidized by the government here. And so the ability to make things rather than make things happen is highly valued here. And so the knee-jerk response to the capitalists saying AI is going to make everything. AI is going to be great. It's going to make everything. People are like, what the fuck are you talking about? No, thank you. Because there's also this implication in Berlin that you can protest things away.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
this assumption that if you just say, no, thank you, future, we don't want that future, then eventually it will just kind of slink back into the darkness. And people are really going for it. People really think, okay, we just bang some pots and pans and get outside and yell really loudly, it will go away. And so that's what's happening here.
Nice. It's interesting. I kind of want to double tap on the concept of creative ethics, because we've talked about how morality, ethics, and economics can coexist before many times when
Yes.
we've been hanging out. So I really value your views on that, and like the idea of protesting it and waiting until it goes away. But at the same time, in my experience, I would challenge that and say I don't think it is. I think it is here to stay, and I think for me, there are parts of it where it does open up certain opportunities because it makes certain things more accessible. From a creative perspective, it does allow for a certain barrier to be removed. There's a differentiation between small companies who might just not be able to afford a photographer to get something that's at least okay. And I'm using photography as a random example. Copy is the same thing, and that just get a little bit of a bump. And then there's big companies that just are sort of saving in that sense. So how do we balance profit and ethical considerations in creative industries, but also don't lose collectively as a society the craftspeople and the muscles that are what make us human, right? And how do we take these new tools as the potential to open something new and allow more people in, and not actually lock out those who want to be part of this world and are being locked out because there's a cheaper solution that's just a subscription to some AI?
I have two responses to this question, but first of all, I have to do a bit of explaining. My two responses are anchored in two different themes. The first is excellence, which you've already touched on, and then ethics. Yeah, those are the two parts of your question that I'm going to get to. But first of all, I'm going to do another E word, which is explain. My view on AI. My view on AI is that it is extremely powerful because it's the sum total of everything that's already been done. Yeah. It's access to the totality of our capabilities, in theory, up until this point. So it's amazing. It's amazing. And hopefully everyone will have access to it because, if you create something and then it has to be translated into Japanese and you unfortunately cannot speak Japanese, then great. You can do that now. I'm a reluctant fan of AI because I love knowledge, and anything that gives you greater access or access to a greater spectrum of knowledge is a good thing. Has to be a good thing for me. However, there is the excellence factor, which is when everyone has access to something, how do you define or redefine excellence? And what happens to all the people who depend on being able to provide a service but aren't in that excellence bracket? Right? There is because my job is relevance, literally, that's what strategy is, making sure creative work is relevant, or making sure whatever we're working on is relevant and hits a target and moves the needle. There is a part of my just nature that doesn't mind when things die if they're not making a difference. Yeah. And I was going to say, it's hard to admit. No, it's not hard to admit. I say this all the time. The first question I ask any of my clients is, does your organization deserve to exist? And if the answer is yes, then tell me why. And after you've told me why, then let's think about for how long. Very few organizations today deserve to exist. And if they do deserve to exist, very few organizations deserve to exist forever. Yeah. And so this is a conversation I'm used to having. And especially living in Berlin and being in the industry I'm in, I have spoken to many, many, many people who naturally feel threatened by the emergence of AI and its arrival on their specific doorstep, their specific professional doorstep. It's threatening livelihoods. It's destabilizing the status quo. Yeah. And obviously I'm speaking from a position of privilege and comfort. I'm really happy with how my career is going right now. I'm really happy with my position in the industry. But even if I wasn't happy, my approach has always been to ask the person in front of me, why do you deserve to exist? And do you believe you deserve to exist in this role forever? Sometimes the status quo needs to be destabilized because it's not serving enough people. It's not inclusive enough. It's not democratic enough. Sometimes it's not excellent enough. Sometimes it's mediocre. So, these are philosophical questions. This is what studying philosophy and then being allowed to apply it in my job has afforded me. The ability to ask these really uncomfortable questions without having to offer a solution, because sometimes the question is enough to trigger a different pathway, a different way of thinking, a different way of framing a problem. So, on the excellence factor, it's like a Pandora's box, you can keep going. But I just think if something can be defined as excellent, then it deserves to exist. Who does the defining and how is a separate conversation. But if it can be defined as excellent, it deserves to exist. The second question, though, is for how long? Should it always be protected? Should the status quo around this point of excellence be stabilized because we need it? And who's we? Who needs it and for how long? So all these, this is beginning to bleed into the ethics factor. What I believe about ethics is that companies are not inherently ethical. Humans are. And a massive problem that we have in all our industries, but especially our creative industry, because creative industries are supposed to be about human tendencies and human instinct. Other industries don't have to care about human tendencies and human instinct, but we do because of what we say we do, which is inspire. We're supposed to inspire, we're supposed to empower, and we're supposed to make things better and make human life better. And so ethics comes into our discourse because of what we say we're going to do as an industry. We're going to improve everyday life. Well, who lives everyday life? Humans do. Therefore, we have to think about ethics because human beings are ethical. I remind everyone, though, that companies are not ethical. Companies are economical constructs to generate capital. They're not ethical. Humans are. So every time a company does something that erodes the quality of human life, it's because a human being decided that it was okay to erode the quality of human life. The company didn't do it. A human being decided it. You know, when AI builds its own companies that no human beings work in, then we can talk about whether or not companies are ethical or not. You know, and even then, AIs are the sum total of everything human beings have done, right? Do you know what I'm saying? At the end of the day, the accountability always lies with humans. And what I'm missing in the discourse and in the media are direct connections between disastrous consequences and human decisions. I don't like the obfuscation that happens in between. I actually think it's evil. I think it's vile. And it's one of the reasons why we have this circularity of argument around things that are called like morally unclear. It's not morally unclear. A human being decided that we weren't going to get the information we needed because they wanted to make profit. A human being decided that you weren't going to get the healthcare you needed because they wanted to make a profit. Those human beings, if they owned it, the thing about villainy is it's a form of genius. Okay. Villains are geniuses. Yeah. And if you are a genius, own it. Own it. If you came up with something that generates like billions and billions of dollars, you have all the coins. Explain how. That's what I would like. I would like accountability. Clarity of accountability, I think, would really lift the veil from a lot of eyes and change how things like democratic voting happens, for example. You know? So ethics is a human thing. Companies and economics are not human inherently. They're not ethical. We have to decide. And our decisions should be transparent. I'll stop there before it becomes a full-blown rant.
While I respect you stopping there, I do want to tap on the idea of good growth, right? So there is, and you've used the term good growth, and we've talked about it, and you've used it for ventures that have a positive cultural impact.
Yes.
And in concrete terms, what would good growth look like for AI?
For me, it's really simple. I mean, good growth doesn't sacrifice anything, right? Good growth doesn't. So the triple bottom line is people, planet, and profit. That's the current framework that's familiar enough to most of the people that will probably watch this. The triple bottom line is something that's good for people and planet and profit. So good growth, assuming that profit is the main currency for growth, because it doesn't have to be. Things can grow in quality as well as in quantity. People grow in quality, right? So, you know, if businesses behaved like people and measured their growth the way people measure their growth, I do think the world would be a better place. But the triple bottom line is a nice, simple, handy marker for me. Good growth puts the people part and the planet part ahead of the profit part. Bad growth puts the profit part first.
How do we, as creatives in the industry who are neither of us are building OpenAI or have direct influence on these items, how do we navigate that space? Because I think, like, you know, for me, I don't want to be defeatist, but I know that my impact on what GPT does and how other companies use it is minimal. I think this is a tool that's here, and it's the same as, you know, the emergence of, I mean, you talked about almost being forced to have an email address, and then we were forced upon was Photoshop and Illustrator on the graphic design industry.
Yep.
And like these things completely changed those industries. And in a way, most graphic designers, photographers had to move on and adopt those technologies, or, you know, unless they had a certain excellence, which was maintained by using the sort of, I'll say, older technologies, they had to move on or become irrelevant. But how do we make sure that within that growth, that we're still navigating that space with these tools that are coming almost from above to us, that are just going to exist in culture? And I think, I mean, as opposed to the Berliners, I think we have to, protesting it won't get me that far.
For me, in a nutshell, the way to navigate any new terrain mindfully is to ask yourself questions the whole time and to ask other people questions. to keep us all honest. We should be always asking ourselves questions and then asking other people questions. And the questions I would like us to ask are related to the excellence and the ethics factors. So the excellence factor, like as you say, these tools are handy. People are finding them convenient. It's improving lives. That's all well and good. That's good. It's available. Let's use it. Let's improve our lives. The question I do always ask myself is, when you're making something, is it excellent? It's a simple question. Is this the most excellent form of this particular format or of this particular object? Obviously, if you're not a genius and you're not an expert, the answer is no. But you'll be surprised the number of people who think that they can use their experiments to make money. Only excellent things should make money. If it serves you in your life, if it serves your mom or your brother or your sister in their life, and you're not charging them for the output of your experiments, then by all means, keep going, live your life. But if you want to charge people money, it has to be excellent. So ask yourself, am I creating excellence? If you're creating excellence, charge for it. If you're not, I don't mind what you do. The other side of the coin is ethics. Is it harming anyone? And this is a question we definitely don't ask enough. Is it harming anyone? Yeah, not just the output, not just you with the output in your hands. You're not harming anyone. You didn't intend to do any harm. Intention is also key. Intention versus actual outcome. Yeah, you're still on the hook, even if you didn't intend the harm. So harm questions related to this particular set of tools are like, where did it come from? How is it made? How is it delivered? Are there any humans in that process? Are there any humans that are beside that process, adjacent to that process, who might be being harmed? Are there people responsible for the raw materials in this process that might be being harmed? Ask the questions. Remind yourself of these questions because they're very important questions. They will help us to seek sustainable ways to get the same outcomes. You know, they will inspire our children to invent sustainable ways to get these outcomes. So those are the kinds of questions. The short answer is ask questions. The long answer is ask those two questions, please. And then the triple bottom line also matters if you're in a business or in an organization that wants to use these tools. Excellence and ethics applies to people, who, planet, where is it coming from? And what we're going to do with it. And then profit, right? Who is profiting? Is it only the people at the top? Who's profiting? So questions is the short answer to your question. Ask questions of yourself, of everyone else who's using it, of your teams, of the people that you're going to charge money to. Ask questions.
On the point of excellence, have you seen any excellence that was, I would say, co-created in collaboration with AI?
I have an example, but for legal reasons, I can't actually tell you.
Fair enough.
I have an example. Yeah, we had a very litigious client once forbid us from sharing our work, and we really needed to share the case study with a kind of similar client. So we remade our case study using AI, and it was amazing, and it was fast, and we needed it, and it was excellent, and we avoided getting
excellence
sued.
In, excellence
Most
out,
importantly,
right?
yeah, we avoided getting sued. That's as much as I can tell you. So it was an excellent outcome for me.
Fair enough. It's interesting, and I find it interesting to see how people are using it. I've talked to friends of mine, our kindergarten teachers, and I've sort of almost forced them to engage with it and said, "Hey, what is it? Something that you do on a day-to-day basis that takes up a lot of time? Have you tried GPT?" And I find it interesting to just see in different places where it is coming into our culture.
For me, that's a litmus test for when something deserves to exist. If something deserves to exist, then it feels effortless. It feels like, there's in innovation, there's the construct of when there is an invention and a range of target audiences, you identify, there's 3 A words. Let me see if I can remember them. You identify for whom is it an authentic addition? Who can grab it and just run with it and it feels authentic, versus for whom is it adapted? For a lot of people, it's an adapted behavior. Going from using telephones like this, like I did as a kid, to even this and then that is that's all adapted behavior. And then the 3rd A is alien. For whom does it feel like a complete alien gesture, like an alien thing that they're never going to be comfortable with, but they'll begrudgingly use it when it becomes the mainstream. And so, yeah, in innovation, for innovation strategy, we often think about any new thing coming in, like, for whom does it feel authentic or adapted or alien?
I love your frameworks. It's great.
It's like literally old school strategy.
For you, maybe. For me, this is always pure gold. Your journey from philosophy student to strategist to entrepreneur, and you've said yourself, and I've said it, I've learned from you asking questions. What is one big question about AI, art, and culture that you're currently pondering, but you haven't answered yet?
It's big. So I, again, feel very lucky. I said about 20 minutes ago that I'm very privileged and happy about where my position in the industry, the journey that I've been on, all the intelligence I've gained along the way, the network of people, the village of friends who I also enjoy working with. So this will not surprise any of those people. But upon reflection, the great thing about, being in work for like 20 something years is that eventually you gain hindsight. You're able to look back and basically see the thread that was behind absolutely everything that you did voluntarily, not just the stuff that you were forced to do by bad bosses, right? And I've always had this fascination, which I actually described in the 9/11 story, this fascination around the schism between society and economy. Yeah. The economy functions pretty much autonomously. It tries to push things into society, like businesses try to push their way into culture with brands, ironically. But the economy, look at what happened during the pandemic. Governments scrambled to rescue the economy, and mainly at the expense of society. So you have these two systems that everybody kind of talks about interchangeably, but are very, very different in moments of crisis. And I've had this long held fascination around bringing them together, bringing societal futures and economic futures together. That's what better business is about. That's what good growth is about. Ultimately, making sure that the future of your organization is tightly aligned to the future of society. Like, that's my hackneyed strategic way of thinking about just being better. And so the other fascination I've had is around art and how art is made. And you know this because you've helped me in many, many instances to explore how art can trigger conversations and inspire people in their work, not just artistic output or artworks, but also artworking, like praxis. And so I had an annual art party for several years in different countries called Art Show, where I would give everybody a big theme and I would ask everybody to make work, and have a big party. We'll trigger a million conversations around themes. You participated, you flew around the world and participated in these art parties. And I'm really pleased to say that, this question that I've always had in my head, I've finally reached a position where I can answer my own question and get paid for it. I have been so lucky to meet people who kind of share that way of thinking. And we have, we don't know what it's called. It's not a consultancy, but we have something that was triggered by a phrase that a client used recently. A client recently said to me, "Isn't art like a language that society can teach business?" And obviously massive light bulb went off, and I was like, "That's nice. That's nice." Art is very much oriented in society. Art is about societal issues. It's about human issues. It's about what human beings worry about, what human beings aspire to. It's very visceral. It's all about engagement. To be fair, I have used it in ways that I shouldn't have. I've tried to use art as a tool. Literally just a tool for engagement. I've called artists engineers. They're like engineers of engagement. They know how to grab people, and we should do that too in our business innovation lab. No, that's not necessarily how it works. And we know that it doesn't work that way, because everything that happens on the economy side eventually falls flat. It's just a fad, right? It doesn't work because it doesn't actually change behavior. It's not authentic. People don't grab it and run with it. And so a different take on the question, it's kind of unlocked a new way of thinking about it for me. Society has art and business needs art, but it doesn't really need art. It needs to learn the language of art. It needs to learn the praxis of art in order to have more meaningful and more pro-human systems. So, like, for example, I often talk to CEOs about their business culture. and we talk about the business, the business, the business, and we talk about the workforce, the workforce, the workforce. And I've recently kind of sat down and thought, this feels odd. I'm using the wrong words, and I'm a word geek. I should know better. It's not the workforce, it's the workplace. And if it's a workplace, what are we actually saying? We don't need the word work. It could be a think place. It could be a meet place. It could be what do we actually do when we're working? Whatever all those verbs are, it's that place. We just call it work because it's where you get paid. Art is also about asking questions. And so just realizing that everything I've been doing over the last 20 years has kind of led to the point where I can now confidently start a conversation with a CEO. I had one recently where I asked the CEO, I said, what kind of research are you doing into modern loneliness? And he was like, why? I was like, well, because your business is about that's the root that is actually the root problem that your business is addressing. And he hadn't been thinking about it that way. He was like, no, we do human connection. We bring people together. And it's like, but why do people need to get together? Because they're lonely. And that's not the kind of topic that he could brief a corporate research agency to navigate in a meaningful way. So he was a bit like, I'm kind of stuck. Like, I can't really just go to like big corporate research agency and say, tell me about loneliness. Because what will you get back? You'll just get kind of stats and factoids and suicide rates. And, you don't get anything that you could actually work with and design against. And so finding a more artful or art-led way to research that topic was required. And I realized most of the businesses I love address real human issues, real human crises that they don't have the tools or the language to approach in a meaningful, authentic way. And that's where art, big asterisk, could play a role. So it's an elaborate answer because it's a thought in progress. But the good news is it's being received really well. It's being received really well by a number of prospective clients that I'm talking to right now.
Great. And yeah, your skill of rephrasing the right question that wasn't asked before is always something I love watching. It's always been great.
Thank you.
So my last question is about young creatives or young strategists listening. And I always intro this with the fact that I think it's important because I think one of the main risks that I perceive with these new tools coming out is that people default to using these tools to get certain tasks done that traditionally you'd have somebody junior in the team support you with. And that would be the way that how I grew my career was I was doing these tasks that were hard and difficult and detailed and took a lot of time and were really important, but were something that I could manage as somebody who was just starting my career. And that's what helped me learn. That's how I was mentored. And I feel that these tools, while it's great that they can take on these tasks, it's kind of making those positions harder to fill because, well, I've got this tool that costs me $20 a month that can do that bit for me.
Yeah.
And there's no messy human side to it, right? Which I personally think is great. I love leading people, but not everybody does. Sometimes you just want an output. So, from what advice would you give people who are starting their careers in your industry how to navigate the coming years of an AI driven change in the art or marketing worlds?
Okay. I again feel very lucky. I feel lucky that I'm able to answer this question. The main reason why I'm able to answer this question is I'm a big sister. I have 6 younger siblings. I'm the eldest of 7. So I've actually had to have many different flavors of this. I've had to field many different flavors of this question over the years. My youngest brother is 18 years younger than me. We had this conversation just a few days ago. So, in my incredibly informed opinion, not just my own personal experience, but those of my siblings, young people in pretty much any industry need to learn or internalize 2 really important things. I'm all about 2s today. The first is workplace hygiene. I'll get the boring stuff out of the way first. Yeah. I encounter so many people, and I mean, I'm not talking about teenagers and 20 somethings here. I've encountered people in their 30s who, because of the fluidity of the education into profession pipeline have somehow escaped the office experience. Obviously, the pandemic also, massive contributor to that, right? Although it was, 3 or 4 years. So I encounter people every day, not just in my work, but in my life, who have never worked in an office. And I won't credit office life for all of the hygiene factors that I'm about to describe, but they were like a intensive education for me and all the people I love to work with. It boils down to common sense, and manners and repetition to become reliable. It's really, really simple stuff, but it completely transforms the way you are perceived. Yeah. Meticulousness, studiousness, honesty, nice manners, common sense, all of these things make other people want to see you more often. Yeah. And I call it workplace hygiene. I mean, it's life hygiene. Almost everything also applies to dating, by the way. I say this a lot. Everything, right? And it's relevant to branding, because branding is being memorable. The way to be memorable is to leave a positive impression. You don't have to know everything. We both know people who know a lot, but suck to hang out with, right? You don't have to know anything, actually. You just have to be there and be positive and be warm and be fun and be friendly. And then listen to everything that's said. Listen to understand, not to respond. These are things that we actually teach our toddlers, that I've also had to teach 35-year-old men mainly. But there's that workplace hygiene. So that's the first thing, workplace hygiene. I don't necessarily mean offices. I'll actually correct myself. Very little work actually happens in offices these days. But if you're in any context where you're either on a job or you are hoping to land a job, that's what I mean by workplace. Yeah, workplace hygiene. Be a cool human. Be someone who people want to see again. That's the most important thing, regardless of your age. I'm hoping that an 18-year-old will see this or somehow get this information, but it's relevant to 48-year-olds too, who missed the lesson. And the second thing, with regards to new tools like AI, I think I also said this a million years ago, the use of all these new tools, will be heralded by industry media and will be heralded by economists and capitalists. And its purpose and its value will be heralded by them only in terms of how it grows their wealth. So I like to remind young people to be the way I was, and I was called insubordinate pretty much every day of the first 10 years of my career, because I could see pretty clearly that the value that was being talked about in my workplace environments were only value to the people at the top. They were only value to the people in power. Whereas what I wanted to do was think about the usage of tools and frameworks and thinking that could benefit everyone and also could benefit the future. So I'll say it again. AI is the sum total of all past capabilities, all past expressions of copy or art or all these things. It's powerful, but it can't create the future unless you want the future to look the same as now. So for me, what I would encourage all young people to do is play with tools and form opinions about the future. Because everyone around you who's older and more experienced, they might demand that you fall in line because you're younger. But the one thing that they can't do is they can't build the future with these things. Young people can, because young people will. So everywhere you go, don't feel less than. Don't feel like, oh, I have to learn everything that everyone's already doing. If you need to learn some common sense and some manners, then yeah, learn that. But in terms of the actual tools and the actual outputs, you have to think of yourself as representing the future, because you are. You are the future director. You are the future CEO. You are the future business builder. You're the future entrepreneur. You're the future user. You're the future parent. You're the future voter. Very few people who are older than 35 think of teenagers and young people that way, but that's who they are. and they command respect, if they're also fun to hang out with, then, think of it as an exchange. They're bringing something very, very valuable to any workplace or any round table. They're bringing an opinion on the future, and you can help to shape that, but you have to give them the tools that they need and give them the time that they need, you know? So yeah, I suppose that's advice for both sides, but hopefully it will inspire young people to just have more confidence in these settings. Because I did, and I was just called insubordinate. Like, you don't have the right to have those thoughts yet. You don't have the right. Who are you? I was asked many times. I just hope that young people don't have to go through that.
I so resonate with that. And I mean, both on the side that some of the one of the threads that I found with great people that I work with of all ages had some service job at some point. So either in a restaurant or in retail or somewhere. Those are the people who have just the highest EQ and can manage difficult social situations the best through hard training. And the other, I just find that so empowering. And it's true, like I think it's so, for me at least, when I was starting my career, it was hard to be like, well, I see these things, but who am I to say something? But I think that message is great, that people should feel empowered, that they are the future, and they should feel empowered to be insubordinate. And that's what I love in my company. Somebody who's politely insubordinate, bring it on.
That's
Like, those
it.
are the
It's
people
the
who those are
balance,
the
right?
people who help us grow and learn, right?
Yes,
Yeah, I mean,
exactly. Good trouble.
I bet we summarize it well. Don't be an asshole and be insubordinate. I think that's great,
Pretty much. Thank you. Thank you for that distillation of everything I've just said.
That's my simplified summarization, I guess. That's how I need to think about it.
Cool. Headline. We have a headline now for this episode. Thank you.
Onika, thank you so much. This has been
That's my
really great.
pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. And it's been absolutely amazing.
I love talking to you. Anytime. Absolutely anytime.